We've got a Ceriatone JCM 800 lead series 2204 50-watt Marshall clone. I have no idea legally how they're able to say JCM 800 lead series on it, but there it is. And the owner of this amp wanted to have a really gig-worthy high-gain amp, and he asked me what was on the market and what he thought he should get. And I said, well, at X price point, there are some really great options. And below that, the quality drops off steeply. So it depends on your budget. And we talked back and forth. And we decided that for his budget, some of the Sir and Friedman offerings were just a bit beyond what he wanted to spend. So I said, why don't you get a Ceriatone 2204 and let me tweak the hell out of it. And we'll start with a pretty good starting point, and everything should be serviceable, and I know exactly what to do to make it even better. So that's what he did. Let's take a look at this thing. From the front, it's pretty much just like the Marshall. Looking at the back, it's got an effects loop with a bypass switch, impedance selector, 2 speakers, bias test points, full half, that's pentode, triode mode for the output tubes. Sounds good, sounds bad. Let's leave it on the sounds good. 500 milliamp, 3 amp for 120 volts, and then a broken IEC connector. Now, this is, I think, a fairly brand new amp. I'm not sure why that is broken, but it seems to be a standard IEC connector, and I have those. So let's take this out of the cabinet and see what's going on. All right. Unknown origin on the transformers. The fit and finish on them seems pretty cheap. They may be fine quality inside. I'm just saying that the metal work is very cheap, square edge feel to everything. A lot of flathead screws for no good reason. There's never a reason to use a flathead screw. Are these JJ filter caps? I'll find out. JJs are typically not great, but the amp, when I first powered it on, didn't seem to have any major issues. So it's got Ruby branded JJ EL34s, tube amp doctor, and a Ruby. Let's see here. Okay, pretty good choices of the tubes that are on the market these days, so no problem there. Let's flip this over, look inside. Actually, first, let's point out something here. This is going to be a bias trim pot, and this scares every tech in the world when they see something like this, because there's not a label on it, and it is just a regular pot being used for bias, which means that someone can physically grab it and turn it and say, what does this thing do? Opposed to a externally adjustable trim pot like on a Fender, where you actually have to take the time to get a screwdriver. And sometimes that time it takes to find a screwdriver is just enough time for someone to think, should I really be turning this? Whereas this, it's like putting a red candy-like button right there. Someone's going to press it. Someone's going to say, what does this thing do? Anyway, let's look inside. For those of you who might be expecting me to shit all over this, you're going to be disappointed. While I'm not entirely sure of the quality of the transformers, the build quality is quite excellent, both in all the attention to detail and the way the board was built to be serviceable, and the grounding. They use a bus wire, but unlike a Marshall or many others, instead of tacking it to the back of all the pots, they have a large diameter bus wire where everything is connected pretty much in sequence. Well, a little break in the sequence between mids and master volume and presence, but what's a few minor mistakes among friends? Probably get away with that in a circuit like this. And then it all goes to ground here at the input. So we've got the AC safety ground over here. I'm sorry, we've got the filter cap grounds over here, tied with the center tap on the transformer, and probably either heater or shield. Let's see where the AC safety ground is made. All right, it has its dedicated lug here with nothing else on it. That's all good. Sorry, I had to take my glasses off to see that. It's got a LED for the lamp. You can tell that because they've got a little limiter in front of it, limiting resistor. The one thing in here that bothers me is not the effects loop. For all I know, this effects loop sounds and works great. I wonder whose design it is. The Holy Grail branding that they do on their caps. They don't make caps. They buy caps and they put their own little plastic shrink wrap on it. I have no idea what cap this is. The problem with it is it's a dual 50 microfarad with a ground at the other side, so shared ground, which means that should this cap need to be replaced, i.e. when this cap needs to be replaced, you're going to be limited to what's on the market that will fit there. The regular Marshall that this is copying had another multi-section can cap beneath the chassis, beneath the board on it, chassis mounted as opposed to this. For right now, let's hope that that thing works well. They've got the same Vichy caps that I use. All the resistors are great, very good quality. The build quality throughout is very good. I'm going to be making some changes to how this thing works, but they are easy changes to implement on this board. Part of those changes is I will be changing out the input jacks for some TRS ones for some switching options. That's going to be a little bit difficult since they did such a wrap here on these leads, but I can probably undo that and redo that to my new jack just fine. So I'm initially pretty happy with everything I'm seeing. Nothing stands out aside from this cap here as either a mistake or something which is going to be of concern down the road. A little concerned by this cap here that's just kind of hanging in space. It's got a resistor and wire silicone to it, so there's a bit of mutual support there, but I guess if they would not have fit in here if it was going up mounted to the board. Belt and sockets. Just not a lot to criticize in this. Now let's see what I can do about making it sound even better. Well, let me say this. Rather than saying sound even better, to sound more like what the client, in this case, wants. Okay, all my little tweaks are done. Nothing huge and earth-shattering, just stuff to give the overall amp a bit more gain, a quieter noise floor. Had a little bit of problems with one of the stock shielded wires in the amp as it came from Ceriatone. It was quite microphonic, and I don't know this for a fact, but it looks like a very low capacitance cable. And sometimes when you have a very low capacitance cable, you have increased microphonics. That seems to be the case here. Anyway, the clean low gain. Let's see, I set everything pretty much to noon. And unlike the stock amp, it'll actually get into a little bit of gain. A lot of stock 2204, 2203s and below gain, you've got to have the preamp gain pretty much all the way up to getting a usable cleans, and this certainly happens well before then. And then on the higher gain stuff, now this amp has got a good bit more gain than the stock, but right now we've got a situation where if it's on 10, it's oscillating. That's fun. Let's see if I can find where that's happening. All right, here's some frustrating shit. No matter where I have the master volume, if I bring the gain all the way up, I get that. If I turn the bass all the way down, now here's what kills me. If I put a screwdriver between the bus and the bus wire and chassis, so that I have a connection from the bus wire there to the chassis there, all that oscillation stops. I'm not muting anything. I'm just having a connection right here from the chassis to bus wire. So I thought, okay, no problem. It wasn't making good chassis connections at this solder joint, which was factory. It was factory. It was very small, had a very small screw, didn't seem to have great connections. So I put in the hardware that I always use, stainless steel, good stuff. Made no difference. Now before, I noticed a couple of the original green wires, which are this lighter green, compared to the darker green I have here on some of my own grounds, were not great. And that's possible that what we're having here is a connection which is not great from the wire, but this would argue against that. What I'm wondering is if it's possible that these wires are not making good contact with this bus wire. So as long as these solder joints are touching chassis, we have ground. Let's try that by doing it over here where there are no solder joints, just copper to chassis. And there, I'm not getting the solution. So what I think is happening here is that these wires are wrapped around this copper bar, and they are tied to ground, but the joints to this copper bar are not great. And that's really tricky to do well with a very heavy gauge copper bus wire like that. So let's see what we can do on that front. Here's the area where all those things were connected, and we had that problem. So I'm really trying to heat this up. Get some of the excess off. Have it really well tinned, because sometimes having too thick a ground bus isn't actually your friend. Now it's going to go away if I touch the solder joint, but it's right here. That's better. That's no good at all. So I'm thinking that I have made a spot here that I can will actually accept solder, and I'm going to have to do the same at all these others, where you may have there's a wire around that bus wire, and there's solder on that wire, but that does not mean that there's an electronic connection to the bus wire. And a meter can lie to you in a situation like this. So we go through and move things around and reflow things and see if I can find a better spot for this to be. Well, that was frustrating. It turns out, no matter what I did, this bus wire just would not make a good connection to ground. It was okay, but it wasn't perfect. And they got away with it in the stock amp because the stock amp had less gain. When I increased the gain, and this is not extraordinarily high gain, this is not in the territory of some diesels and stuff. This is higher gain than a stock 2204. A little less bright, which makes it nice. It just could not handle what was going on. I was getting oscillations and ground eddy currents and all kinds of stuff. So now, as you can see, that bus wire is gone. There's a little micro bus bar here I'll talk about in a second, just for the two components in the present circuit. But like the other Marshalls I've done lately, like that 802204, got a ground lug there with the V1 stuff going to it, a ground lug here with the V2 stuff going to it, and then a ground lug here which has the presence and tone stack and master volume grounds. And now all that oscillation is gone, and I can crank the gain all the way up, and it doesn't oscillate, and that sounds kind of like this. But it is late at night, and my wife has to put up with this nonsense, so I'll do a real playing test tomorrow. But it's really nice to have all that strange oscillation and gronk gone. So I look forward to hearing this for real. You can't really tell what this sounds like from this little video with the lav mic 6 feet off axis and probably clipping from what I just played, but nice not to have that yuck. Well, I almost forgot to talk about my little bus bar, because I had this cap and this resistor that were otherwise unsupported. I did want a little bit of bus wire here, but I didn't want to try to use this huge copper that just was not bonding to the solder joints. So rather than this, which looks to be 14 gauge, maybe it's 12 gauge, anyway, very thick copper, I took two tinned 20 gauge bus wires and I did a nice twist together. So two 20 gauges together comes up with something that, once it's all soldered, is actually a little bit larger than this. But because each one was tinned, it takes solder really well. So this is a very strong connection. So this cap's not going to come loose. This resistor is not going to come loose. This wire, which ties it down here to this ground lug on the chassis, is not going to come loose. And this has perfect conductivity, which is the problem we were having with that large copper bus wire. So in an amplifier where I really do need to use a bus, which I don't do very often, this is my preferred approach, to take some 20 gauge or 22 gauge tinned bus wire and do a nice twist to make up a larger diameter of stuff, however big I need it to be. And then you can solder to that without any problems, and it looks kind of pretty. And it can be, I could have done the entire thing, the entire length of this. It's just a pain in the butt to do. And having the discrete connections like this is even better.